Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, he covers the Houston Rockets, who will be facing the New York Knicks in short order later in a few days. Covers them for ESPN 975. Also is the host of Red Nation Hoops podcast, and he writes for Clutch Points, which I was just saying to him has absolutely blown up over the last few years. So if you have not seen him or read him or heard him, I don't know what you're doing. You're probably not following the NBA, but you should definitely change that. Salman Ali, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for that really kind introduction.
Thank you for coming on here to talk about the Rockets, I guess maybe in a slightly different context than you usually talk about them. Although I guess maybe that's as good a place to start as any. What has it been like this year covering this team that I guess they've been in the forefront of the NBA, mind, the common, NBA mindset of like the casual fan as much as any other team, right?
Yeah, and it's been that way for the last 7 years, which is why this is going to be a tough adjustment period for Rockets fans that just became Rockets fans within that time frame, right? Because they don't know a time where this team wasn't relevant, and now they're going to be non-relevant for a couple of years until they get their stuff back in order. It's been weird covering the team. It definitely has. I'm used to covering a contender. Now I'm going to be covering a team that's in a new stage of their life cycle, which means I have to talk about them differently. Now the games are kind of secondary. Now the big dates on the calendar are the trade deadline, the off season, the draft, stuff like that. Like when you're a rebuilding team, that's what you focus on. And the games are obviously important, right? Like you want to win, you want to establish a good culture, see what kind of talent you have, but more importantly, you're trying to get that cornerstone piece, and the only way to get that is through those avenues. So that's the way I choose to cover them now. It's like I have to kind of shift gears and try to focus on those areas. So my next podcast is going to be talking about the trade deadline, for example, and I'm going to be spending a good deal of time on that over the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's a good transition because I think, so here in New York, we've been in your shoes for I always say, like, it's easiest to just be like, most of the last 20 years. That's not quite true. There have been a couple little segments of time, most notably during the early Melo years, but for the better part of the last I would say 7 years, it's been okay. What are we doing with the trade deadline? How are the lottery balls looking? Who are the good prospects? This year, and now the Knicks are kind of in this in between world where I think there are still a lot of fans who are approaching this as you are now approaching covering the Rockets, where it's like, no, we're still a ways away, but there's also this other kind of mindset out there, like, okay, they're starting to put some stuff together. Maybe, we should look into, how to kick this thing into high gear sooner rather than later. Before I get to some possible trade stuff, though, I'm just curious. Again, I always am fascinated by what people who don't follow the Knicks on a day-to-day basis think about what the Knicks are doing specifically this year, and even maybe a little bit more generally, since Leon Rose has come in. So just, kind of as an outsider, what are your impressions of this team and like what they've been up to?
Well, I'm definitely evaluating everything Leon Rose is doing very closely, just because anyone who comes from a different sphere of, into that front office role, usually, it's scout, former head coach, former player. Those are the, analytics. Those are the usual backgrounds that you become a front office executive with. And coming from the agent side, it's different. It's new. I'm not used to, there are examples out there. Bob Myers is obviously the most famous example.
Sure.
But it definitely is new. It's a new age of general manager, and I want to see how he operates. And I liked the Tibbs hire, to be honest. I've always been higher on Tibbs than I think the general public. He has his warts as a coach, and everybody knows that. We don't have to get into it here. But the bottom line is he is a good coach. Like when you put all that other side, all that other stuff aside, same thing with Mike D'Antoni. People always get into his warts, but when we all know what those warts are, but when you put all that other stuff aside, he is a really good coach. And when you're trying to make a coach hire, what are you looking for, right? Like that's what you're trying to accomplish. So
generally, good is better than bad.
Right.
A rule of life.
Right. Yeah. Like I thought they made a good hire. And what I'm worried about now, obviously, is Tom Thibodeau has this tendency when he has a high degree of say with the front office to go after his old guys, right? And the Derrick Rose trade is kind of a good example of that, right? Like I'm worried that he's going to go too far down that rabbit hole, and I hope he doesn't. I hope he lets Leon Rose handle that, and perhaps Leon Rose wants Tibbs' input. I'm sure they're probably collaborating a fair bit, but it should not be to the point where he had the same kind of say he had in Minnesota. At that point, I think everybody can fairly assess that he had too much say there.
Yeah, it goes without saying. It's funny. After we just had a game against the Heat. We're gonna it'll play another game against the Heat after we're recording this. We're recording this on Monday night, but it'll be before we run this pod. In any case, Jimmy Butler said after the first game, when asked about the rumored Derrick Rose acquisition, just deadpan, Tibbs is getting the band back together because we just Taj Gibson made his return a few weeks ago, so it is what it is. I think a lot of fans here in New York share your concern, and I'm not sure how much you know about. We have a rookie here, Emmanuel Quickly, who has opened some eyes.
Oh, I've noticed. Yeah.
I want to stick with this for a second because again, we're in our bubble, right? Has that made waves around the league? What Quickly has been doing here?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you talk about the Rookie of the Year candidates, right? He's in there. He's got to be in there. If he's not in there, you're not doing it right. And he's definitely impressed, and he's a bright spot in what's been a pretty impressive season for the Knicks. Nobody thought they'd be this good. Even if you think the Eastern Conference is just a complete, pile of trash, like they're just tearing through that pile of trash, right? In a way that none of us expected. Like in a way that none of us expected them to, yeah. And they're competing and they're playing hard, and like Emmanuel Quickly has been a bright spot on that. And yeah, he might be playing 15 minutes a game. How many minutes is he playing? You're muted.
Yeah, that's one of the issues lately. Is he was up or had a couple games where he was around 30 minutes, and then the last couple games only 12 13 minutes a night, so it's been fluctuating a little bit.
Right. Yeah. So he might not be playing that much, but like that's fine. Like this rookie class is not like you're not finding those star type rookies in this class, and I think Quickly is kind of an example of a rookie that can just be a good player, just a good contributing player,
which they need more of,
right,
as it were. In Houston, I have to touch on the Harden thing before I get to the main crux of our conversation. He's gone. Are you happy about that? That you're not, I mean, I don't know if I should say that you don't have to cover him anymore, that you don't get to cover him anymore. I mean, what's the right way to phrase that question?
Well, it definitely changes the gears in the way I cover the team, obviously, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast. But as far as am I happy or not? Like I don't really, I'm not a fan of the team anymore. I was about 3 years ago. It kind of turned that part of my brain off. Mm-hmm. But as far as what the fans here feel, I think they were exhausted by the point the trade happened. It's just because he had really drugged this out. Like he made this really, really ugly. Like I'm not sure if you remember the Vince Carter situation in Toronto, but
I remember it well. Yeah.
Yeah. It felt really similar. Right. And this might have actually been worse because he had the press conference right before the trade happened where he just said, this isn't going to work. This can't be fixed. Like, I don't think Vince Carter got to the point where he came on a microphone and said, this isn't going to work. This can't be fixed. It never got that bad, but it definitely stained his legacy a little bit, but I think his legacy will live on. Like, I think, and it's something I've been monitoring. Like there's just you see a lot of James Harden quipping on Rockets Twitter, right? Like there's just a lot of quipping at Harden, and you'll see Harden defensive jokes, and it's like that stuff didn't exist here, right? This is when you talk about people who defended James Harden. if you did like an area map of the United States, there'd be a big red dot on the city of Houston, right? Like it wouldn't exist much farther than that, right?
Yeah.
Because for some reason, Harden's just not that popular of a player. But
I always like appreciated what I just, because I'm a stats guy. So if you give me numbers, I like the numbers are the numbers, and the numbers that dude put up were just nobody else put them up in the history of the league. So, you know,
yeah, I mean, I consider him one of the 25 greatest players of all time. I still do. Like he's amazing, and I don't know how you can, you know, I don't know how you can say otherwise, but when it came to defending Harden, this was the fan base that went ride or die with him. Yeah. And it really does seem like they've turned on him a little bit, and they've soured on him because of the way it ended. But I think give it time. The Rockets fans will come around. I just think they're a little sour right now. I just think they want to enjoy their new team. I think they want to enjoy a team without expectations, right? Like that was always the thing with this Rockets team for the past few years. They had these heavy expectations. The playoffs couldn't be fun anymore. It was extremely stressful for these fans, and like it was like if they couldn't get to a conference finals, it was a bust season. Basically, because they were at that point in their career, like they've already seen a Western Conference, 2 of them already, right? And they wanted to see an NBA Finals appearance, and they just never got that. And you know, every time they didn't get to the conference finals, they'd just be mocked for it. Every time they got to the conference finals, fell short. Same thing, they'd get mocked for it, and it got to the point where it's like, I think they like that this team has no expectations on them. Like they can just go play basketball, be as good as they possibly can be. They have a pretty important pick swap that they want to protect. I think with Miami and
Oklahoma City. I was about to ask, is there, because if I recall correctly, it's top 4 protected. Otherwise, you guys get the worst of those. I believe the worst of those 3 picks. Right. So I was going to ask, is there can't be any incentive to tank this season, right? Because like, why would you?
No, there's no incentive to tank. I mean, they have to try and be better than Miami or be as close to Miami in record as they possibly can. Right now, sure. Miami has struggled to come out of the gate as of late, which helps their cause a little bit, but they're going to quickly get things going. They just got Jimmy Butler back. They're going to be better than what they've been. At least that's what I expect. But I
expect the same. Yeah.
Right. Like I that should be their only goal. I think when you're talking about what the fan base should be rooting for, you should be rooting for as many wins as possible because you have every incentive to win this season.
John Wall is there. Was once upon a time a pretty damn good player. Has looked pretty good this year from what I've seen. Obviously, you've watched a lot more of him than me. Victor Oladipo, we're going to get to in a second. Christian Wood is on the, I don't know, should we say he's on the fringes of the All-Star conversation? Should we say he's like just inside the All-Star conversation? Where do you, I don't know where you have him. I think he's been pretty awesome this year.
He's been pretty good, but I think this latest injury kind of definitely puts him back in the fringes.
Yeah, right? No, that's fair. I'm not sure he's played quite enough games to really be in there. Regardless, there's a fun team somewhere lurking in there. I mean, PJ Tucker is still there. We don't know what's going to happen with him. And you know, obviously the bevy of, it seems like the eternal spring of 3-point shooters that you guys have. You just shuttle them in and out of guys who could just knock down shots. What did you have 11 in the first quarter against, what was it, New Orleans last week? Some insane number. It's just, I don't know how you guys do it. In any case, what's the plan here now for Houston? Because I know a lot of Knicks fans are looking specifically at Oladipo, but maybe another player or two as like, okay, let's try to pillage, these guys. You said the fans are enjoying this year, not worrying about tanking or anything like that. What's the goal? What's the short-term goal for Houston right now?
For the front office?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that they definitely view it the same way. They want to be good this season, but they're not going to, not listen to trade offers at the deadline. I actually do think they're going to be pretty active at the deadline. They say they're going to try and use the trade exception they got from the Harden trade. I doubt that will materialize into anything, because that would more than likely require them paying the luxury tax. And I don't think they want to pay the luxury tax for a team that's it's not going to contend this year. So I think what you're more than likely looking at is a PJ Tucker trade. I feel like that's the surest thing to a trade you're going to get from Houston. The Rockets are probably going to trade PJ Tucker, and I think there's going to be a market for him. I don't know what he's going to net, because he is in the final year of his contract and he is 35 years old. I suspect the Houston's looking for a first round pick, but at the very least, they can probably get back 2 seconds for him. And I think when you look at other kinds of players, obviously Victor Oladipo has been a hot subject, and I suspect that's part of the reason you brought to bring me on. Victor Oladipo is going to have some demand at the deadline, but here's my theory. I think Houston traded for him with the idea of keeping him this summer, either for the cap space or for a good contract, just for a good piece that they can hold on to. And here's my thinking. If they were just going to trade for someone that they could later trade, why wouldn't they just get Karis LeVert, right? Now, obviously, the health complications may have played a role in it, but we have no idea, right?
Did they know? Has there been any reporting? Because we know that came out from when Indiana did their medical. Do we know whether Houston knew about any of that?
Well, what I'll say is Houston is a very smart front office, and they find stuff out about players that the general public just doesn't know. Like they knew that John Wall was healthy for a while and was looking good from these runs, and so it's possible. But we're talking about we're talking about cancer. I don't think they knew that. Like I think like that. Karis LeVert didn't even know that. This was like a life-saving trade for him, which is thank God this happened. Because I'm sure he's grateful that they found that this early. And I think when in regards to whether or not Houston, probably not. But I think they threw in that second round pick because they wanted the expiring contract just to have some flexibility, whether or not they wanted the cap space this summer or whether or not they wanted to keep Victor Oladipo. They just want to see what happens. Right. I think they value the asset of Victor Oladipo more than the asset of Karis LeVert. And for the purposes of this offseason, I think they want to have the pliability of his contract.
So that's really interesting to me. And here I totally get that stance. And it makes sense because I think to a certain extent, the Knicks front office, almost since Leon Rose took over, has been doing kind of the same thing. Let's keep kicking the can down the road, right? Until we know what we need to do, until we're forced against something. They didn't really have any substantive extension talks this summer with Mitchell Robinson because they didn't need to, right? They didn't sign any players to more than a 1-year deal, with the exception of former Houston Rocket Austin Rivers, and that's only a first-year guarantee. So I understand that thinking. The thing I guess that I'm curious about with Oladipo specifically is he strikes me as a guy who wants a big payday. And the only reason I say that is a combination of the reporting in regards to the contract extension he turned down from Indiana. I guess it was this offseason, something around $20 million a year, which seems low. But I just, I wonder if he isn't someone that already has one foot out the door, or I'm not even sure what's worse, if he's someone that is going to be like, okay, I'll stay, but I want, the fifth year, or I want, an annual number that starts with a 3. Is there any sense yet of where Oladipo's camp is with that sort of stuff?
So what's interesting is he has a ton of leverage this summer because all these guys signed extensions. Like every top tier free agent re-extended this summer. I suspect that has a lot to do with COVID and the current economics of the league. They just want to lock in that money right now while they can get it. And Victor Oladipo was not one of these people. So he is going to be the top dollar free agent, and he's going to be demanding a lot. Now, what he wants and what the Rockets are willing to give are two totally different things. I don't think the Rockets are going to give him a full max straight up. Like if they do, it would very much surprise me. And if it,
that's a spicy meatball full max for Victor Oladipo.
Yeah, it's just a lot of money. And again, the Rockets are in a position right now where they can no longer overpay guys. When they had James Harden, they could overpay to keep guys, right? Because they're in contendership mode. You have to do everything you can to surround the best team around James Harden to maximize his prime, yada yada yada. But now they're no longer under pressure to sign bad contracts. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They're under pressure to sign good contracts that they can trade for possible cornerstone pieces, right? And I think if they sign Victor Oladipo to a number that is less than, salvageable, I don't think they'll be able to trade it. And I think that's what they're going to be looking at with every kind of free agent deal they make this summer. Can we trade this later on down the line? I don't think they want to be, I don't think they want to be tampered down by any contract. The only one that's going to tamper them down is John Wall. But
I was going to get there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But they can't really do anything about that, right? And I think they view that as an upgrade from the Russell Westbrook contract, right? Which I think at this point it looks pretty clearly like it's probably going to be an upgrade from the Russell Westbrook contract.
I hope that someone within your front office got arrested for, I don't know if it's burglary or larceny or what the charge would be. It's been a few years since I was in law school. But to get a first round pick in that trade, and I know it's a heavily protected first round pick, but like, do they just feel like they, stole something right from under Washington's noses here? Because that seems ridiculous.
Well, at the time, I think a lot of us expected that Westbrook was going to be the better player this season, but no one really thought that John Wall was going to look this good. Did you expect that John Wall was going to look this good?
I mean, I'd heard what everybody heard, which is that, the initial, not what you're saying, which is that Houston knew for a fact that he looked good. Like there were some reports that Wall's looking good. Beal knows he looks good. He's excited. Like that was obviously all nonsense, but that's, to me, I think John Wall has gotten a bad rap over the last few years because I like you and like a lot of people, I remember when that dude was going good, and when he's going good, he's good. But we didn't know what he was going to look like. So that's a very fair point.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what you said right there is the main reason that I thought Westbrook was likely going to be the better player. Like I would have put money down that Westbrook was going to be the better player this season because he's coming off of an Achilles injury, right? And granted that it happened 2 years ago and he's had a lot of time to recover, but it's still this was a career ender 10 years ago in basketball. Now, it's incredible the amount of progress we've made on that, right? Like Kevin Durant's back and now John Wall's back and they both look great. And granted, they're much younger than what Kobe was when he tore his Achilles, but still it's remarkable how much progress we've made on this specific injury on a medical front. But I definitely didn't expect that he'd look this good coming off of it. Now the Rockets are doing a pretty good job at resting and recovering him on back-to-backs and stuff like that. And, they're probably going to continue doing that throughout the course of the season. But still, I mean, he looks every bit as fast, every bit as explosive, every bit as good defensively, which, I mean, if you remember what he looked like defensively 2 years prior to the Achilles, I mean, his effort just waxed and waned. Really did. He looked really stiff. And he talked about how, in addition to, getting his Achilles right, he got the bone spurs removed from his foot.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't know that until he revealed that he had been playing with bone spurs in his foot for 2 years, which is, I mean, I can't imagine how painful that is, but it's certainly difficult to defend with that stuff going on in your foot. And, he looks really good defensively because of all the surgeries he's had these past couple of years. And I think that's partly that's partly the reason Houston decided, we're going to do this. This is the best deal out here for Westbrook. Westbrook is the one who demanded the trade. Houston didn't, go into the offseason thinking we have to deal Westbrook. They were handed this hand and they decided, okay, this is probably the best offer we're going to get. I mean, no other team is going to give them the first round pick straight up, unprotected or not, protected or not. They just weren't going to get that. And they found a team that was willing to give them it. And, they were willing to take a gamble on him. I always viewed that trade as, okay, Houston's doing this for the sweetener. You're right. Like
I think that's how I viewed it. That's how I viewed it too.
Right. Like I didn't think it was a John Wall for Westbrook swap. I thought it was a Westbrook for this first round pick, and we'll just take a flyer on John Wall. And I think Houston might have viewed it differently. I think they did it for John Wall and that pick.
And boy, is it going to be interesting, because that pick at some point, I think it's 2026 or some crazy year, it eventually becomes unprotected, I think. But the protections are hefty. It'll be, because now you look at Washington and, who knows what they're going to do with Bradley Beal, but like, would it shock you if they were in a situation where they were, like, remember the Lakers a few years back where they were just gunning for a bottom record every year to try to keep that pick, which seemed like it was perpetually top 5 protected. I almost wonder, like, because again, Wall's good. If that contract number wasn't so high, I have to think that there would be, because it's 2 years after this one, but it's obviously 2 years at 96 million total, or no, not 96. Sorry. It's 40. No, it's about around 90 million total for those 2 years. You don't think there could be any market for him at some point before this contract ends, do you?
I don't think he finishes his contract in Houston. Okay. I'll say that. Like, I don't know when a deal will come, but I think a deal will come. Okay. Right. And I think as more years come off the contract, more teams are willing to eat the back end of that contract if he still looks good. Right. And I think, this year is definitely helpful towards that cause, but it really depends on what the point guard market is going to be and what teams actually need a point guard of his caliber to fill in a gap. Right now, I don't see a team.
I know one that I happen to write about and podcast about nearly every day. I mean, but it's if we were talking about the Knicks in this situation that they are in literally right now, and it was a year from now when Wall's contract had a year and a half left on it, as opposed to 2.5 years left on it. Now, obviously, the money makes it tough because Julius Randle has gone from expendable piece to all-star consideration. So I don't know that they'd be able to figure out the money, but I think they'd be in on him. Absolutely. If it was a year less on the contract. Would you be
in on him as a Knick at age 32 or whatever he'll be at that point?
I would not, because I think there are the opportunity. I think I'm, as I've just said, I think Wall's really good, and I think he would absolutely help them right now, but I think the opportunity cost for the cap space that they have both now and potentially in the summer, even with the lack of free agents, and I guess that'll get us back to Oladipo, I think there's some other stuff that they could, hopefully, if their front office continues to be smart and creative, can do with that money.
I totally agree. I think that's the healthier way to look at it. I think it's the better team building way to look at it, and I think
for sure.
And that's why I think when you look at teams that might be interested in Wall, you got to look at these contender teams that are just a piece away, and that piece happens to be point guard, and that's the problem, right? Like I don't see a lot of these contender teams that look a piece away. Maybe a couple years down the line where eventually LeBron takes a step back. I don't know, and the Lakers decide to throw in an offer. I don't know. Like I don't see it. I don't see it at this point. But that's why the Rockets can afford to hold him. Right? It doesn't hurt to hold him for a couple of years. I don't think they have a lot of incentive to take the next 2 years because that's the only 2 years they own their own pick. But I don't think they're going to find a John Wall trade this summer. I mean, the market's just not developing right now, right? It's just hard to see. The Chris Paul market was very fruitful because there were a lot of teams at that point that needed a point guard. This summer, a lot of teams, resolved their point guard need. The Suns obviously eventually traded for Chris Paul. The Bucks went ahead and traded for Drew Holiday. Like a lot of teams,
1 year less on Chris Paul's contract than both Wall and Westbrook. So that I think came
correct. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And Paul is a better player. It's just another part of this. Right. I think right now I don't see a market. So, maybe a year down the line, but it's very difficult for me to see a situation in which John Wall finishes out his contract unless they get back to contendership faster than I expect.
Wouldn't that be so? I mean, you guys are second in defense in the league this year. So I don't know, maybe it's not that crazy to think, but it sounds like they're more looking to pivot in the other direction than like, hey, let's do a quick turnaround here, right?
Yeah, you would hope so, because I think so. They have some interesting pieces, right? Christian Wood's obviously the most tantalizing piece right now on the team. He's 25 years old, looks like a stud. I mean, he signed for $12 million a year, just in a
best contract of the summer, I think. It has to be.
Yeah, I mean, it was right up there with Jeremy Grant for sure.
I'd rather have Wood at his money than Grant at his money. All due respect to Jeremy Grant, have a very nice year. I'd rather have Wood myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a close call. I think Christian Wood. I did not expect him to have the face up game that he has. So everybody knows he's a good shooter, right? And like the whole rap on him was like he can finish at the rim off pick and roll, and he can shoot the three ball. So you can have him play next to at the time you can have him play next to James Harden off pick and roll, and you can have him space the floor next to Westbrook and Harden, or Wall and Harden. And what ended up happening was that obviously the Rockets traded Harden, and he's having to do more creation than I think anyone expected he would do in Houston, and he can actually do it. Like that's what's surprising. He can score off the dribble. He can get to the basket. He has a feathery touch. He can do floaters. He can do finger rolls. He can dunk. He can do hook shots. He has a few different ways he can finish around the rim, and he's pretty accurate at it. He has like 65% true shooting right now. Really efficient scoring. And his 3-point shooting has kind of become secondary, which I think is actually healthy for his game. He should not become like a stay out there and shoot threes kind of guy. Like he should definitely, take advantage of the fact that he's such a great finisher. He got these Porzingis comparisons when he first got traded to Houston, and I'm looking at it right now, and I'm just like, is he a poor man's Kristaps Porzingis, or is Porzingis a poor man's Christian Wood? Right, like
Porzingis is making twice as much money as him, and I don't think. I mean, this injury aside, which I don't think this injury is believed to be that serious, right? This Wood injury.
No, it looked serious at the time, but it looks like a straight roll.
It did look serious at the time, but it looks better now. But no, I think it's the other way around. Talk about a guy who, again, not that Houston should be or is thinking this way, but like, sneaky trade candidate. If the Rockets are not going to be good until Christian Wood is on his next contract, because it's only 3 years, talk about a guy that you could get something nice for on this contract that he's on. But I guess we're not quite there yet.
Here's the thing. Like, if I'd like to see what his ceiling is first, right? That's fair. Okay. Let's see what he is. I don't quite know where, like, on a championship team, where he would preside, whether he's like the third best player or fourth best player. I have no idea, or maybe even better than that. I doubt that he's probably second or first. But
we're asking these questions about Julius Randle right now. Literally, like, is he a second piece? Is he a third piece? Can he be a lower piece because he needs the ball so much? It's like, these are the questions as you're a middling team, you kind of have to contend with, right?
Yeah, you have to think about it, right? Yeah. And if he is better than if he's better than a third piece on a championship team, then maybe Houston wants to keep him. But if he's not much more than that, then is he going to become like we see a cornerstone piece on the market, we have to throw a Christian Wood on the table in that kind of a deal, right?
Okay.
Like if a top 10 player becomes available in a couple of years, right, and Houston is in a position to trade. I mean, they just got all these picks from Brooklyn, right? They restocked their pick closet, right? So they could perhaps be in the market for that kind of a player if they throw in Wood in some of these Brooklyn picks.
2 more, and then I'm going to get you out of here. You've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate this. Back to Oladipo for 1 sec. So I wrote a whole thing on him the other day, and I had a bunch of questions that I kind of asked and tried to answer. And one of the questions, as I typed it, I was like, this is stupid. This is a stupid question, but I typed it anyway. Is Victor Oladipo still good? Which is silly because he's averaging 25 and 5, which you can't do if you're a bad basketball player. However, his efficiency is, I mean, whatever is, but it's the under the floor that's under the tank, right? And it's just there are concerning signs with the 3-point shooting, and it's just he doesn't go to the rack quite as much. He's not drawing fouls like he used to. Watching him as you have every day this year, can you just give me a sense of like what your opinion of Victor Oladipo is as a basketball player right now?
He's fine. I mean, like,
a ringing endorsement.
I mean, I think he's a good player. I don't think he's like, listen, he was like a third team All NBA guy a couple years ago. I don't think he'll ever get back up to that.
And I thought he got jobbed. I thought he should have been second team that year. And Russ actually, I thought took his spot on the second team. I thought he was a top 10 player that year.
Yeah, he was really good that year, but I mean, he suffered a pretty severe injury, and it's really tough to recover from that. This is like what is his second full year? Or is this his first full season or second full season?
So last season he came back because he suffered the injury 2 seasons ago, came back last season, and now so it's been 2 years, essentially over 2 years.
Yeah, so he's probably not going to get much better than this, right? Like I think maybe he needs time to reacclimate in Houston, but at some point you are what you are, and he's probably third, fourth best player on a championship team. Okay. He probably still he's good enough to be a starter for sure. I think because he's just too valuable defensively. But
has his defense been good?
Oh yeah, he's been really good defensively.
Okay, that's good to know.
But when you're talking about offensive threats, he should not be one of the 2 or 3 best threats on your team.
I know he had the ball in his hands a lot for a couple of games at Wall, or maybe it was just one. I watched one game where he was the point guard and he was directing that should not be his role, right? Directing an offense?
No. And Houston's just a unique situation right now where they just lost James Harden and they're trying to figure a lot of this stuff out on the fly.
Yeah.
Right. And I think more than likely it's going to settle into, he's like the secondary or tertiary ball handler. They're just having to cycle in and got a lot of guys in and out because of, John Wall's injury management. Like John Wall is out today actually, and Eric Gordon, because it's first half of a back-to-back. So
okay.
They're doing a lot of that this season, and I suspect Victor Oladipo is going to play a lot of point guard. So it's tough because they don't have much behind those two for ball handling purposes. I mean, you're talking like, is Sterling Brown going to be that? Like, no, it's probably not. Like, it's not going to be David Nwaba either. It's going to be him. It's going to be Victor Oladipo at that point. Steven Saz is trying to work with what he's got, and I have a lot of sympathy for him because this has been a really tough coaching job this year for him, and I thought he's done a pretty good job. He's not a perfect coach, but he's a rookie head coach and he's doing the best he can. He's obviously really talented as a defensive tactician, and in Dallas he got to show what he can do as an offensive tactician. When he's given the tools, right? Like I think he's a pretty capable guy, but I think we just got to give this roster a little bit of patience, wait for it to get healthy, see what it can be. I think it's not going to be much more than an 8 seed in the Western Conference, right? Or 6 to 8 seed in the Western Conference at most. But that's fun for Rockets fans right now because they've had to watch a team that's it had to be top 4. And if it was a 5th seed, it better get past the first round. Right. And now it's like, they can just watch a team be fun.
You have a lot of Knicks fans that are going to be rooting for Houston this year because the better they do, in theory, there's a better chance that they go above the Mavericks, whose pick New York owns, which is a good transition to the very last thing. My line of demarcation in terms of what the Knicks would consider giving up in a trade for anybody, a significant player this year, has always been the 2023 Dallas pick, which we own, which is top 10 protected for 3 years. I don't think the Knicks are going to trade this year's Dallas pick, especially now. I don't think they're going to trade any of their key young players.
It's a sweet pick right now. It's a really good pick.
I'm going to have something on it in my newsletter coming up soon, but I'm not ready to, I'm not all in on it yet. I still got to see them lose a few more games, but I'm getting there. I want to be there. I very much want to be there. That 2023 Dallas pick, do you think if the Knicks put that pick on the table, so it's top 10 protected, but it is a first rounder, along with, let's say, a Kevin Knox, who is has had a, let's just say, an uneven career, to say the best. He's currently riding the bench in New York. He's out of the rotation. And maybe a bit of salary filler, but for the most part, the Knicks would take on all of Oladipo's 20 million even, or 21 million. Do you think the Rockets would entertain that, or do you think they would just rather wait it out until the summer?
Well, it depends what the salary filler is and how far out extends.
Let's say, okay. So Kevin Knox, who's making 4.8 this year, and there would need to be a little bit more to make the money work now. So let's do, we could do Austin Rivers. We could do Nerlens Noel, all salary that expires this year and is like, it would save the Rockets about, $10-11 million.
I think they definitely would listen to that kind of a deal because, I mean, again, like I talked about the pliability of Victor Oladipo's contract. Part of that pliability is that it's expiring. And if they're getting expiring contracts back in a deal, that definitely helps their cause, right? And that makes it much easier to trade. And if you're getting a first round pick back for Oladipo, I mean, you traded a second round pick to get Oladipo. I mean, you're trading a second round pick essentially for a first round pick. That's a pretty good deal of business for Rafael Stone. So I definitely think they would listen to it. Again, it really depends on what Houston is trying to accomplish at the deadline. They're posturing a bit. I don't think they're going to trade their trade exception for a significant piece. If they do, that would legitimately floor me. If they try to be into the luxury tax this year for this team,
oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, it would cause a lot of. I mean, it would definitely alter the way we view owner Tillman Fertitta, right? Because if you pay,
what a guy,
he goes into the luxury tax for this team. I mean, and he did not go into the luxury tax for the past 3 seasons with James Harden. I mean, that's incredible. But yeah, it would floor me. But yeah, I do think their objectives are, let's acquire as many first round picks back as we can. Let's not compromise the roster too much because again, we still want to win this year because we still don't want to give up a really, really good pick in that pick swap. So I think if they trade Oladipo, they're probably not trading PJ Tucker. And if they trade PJ Tucker, they're probably not trading Victor Oladipo.
Interesting. Okay. And I hadn't thought like that. Okay.
I mean, because you think about it, you can only give up so much and still be good this year, right? And
sure. Yeah.
and you still want to get back first round picks, but at the same time, at what expense, right?
So I actually wonder which of those two. I hadn't even spent time thinking about it. Which of those two guys is netting more in a trade this year? Who's getting the better pick back?
Probably.
I don't. Is there a clear answer to that question? Because I don't know who that there is.
It depends on how much you value Victor Oladipo's bird rights.
I bet the Knicks would place some value, whether that right or wrongly. I think they would place some value on those bird rights. I really do.
So if you place a pretty decent amount of value on it, then I think it's definitely Oladipo, right? Because if not, I mean, you're talking about a 35-year-old versus a 25-year-old in Oladipo or 26-year-old?
29 going on. He's actually, wait, hold on. He might be 28. I may have just spoken ill of. I don't want to make anybody older. I hate when people make me older than I am. I'm 37. I want to stay 37 for the 2 months I have left. But yeah, no, he's under 30, which is
well. You know what? The pandemic, you get to wipe out a year of your life. This is my rule, by the way. This is my rule. So if you're really struggling with how old you are after the pandemic, I think you get to in your head wipe off a year. So if you're 25, you're 24. If you're 37, you're 36. Okay. Right? Because we don't get to count this year. It doesn't count. Like it's not fine. Fair. I'll take it.
And I should know Victor Oladipo's birthday. It's 6 days before mine. He's 28 going on 29. He'll be 29 in May. So he's, for all intents and purposes, he's 28.
Yeah, but my point is he's 7 years younger than PJ Tucker.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I do. If you value the bird rights, he's probably the better option. He's probably going to get the better pick.
I've had my eye on Houston really since the beginning of the year because there was a point in time where I thought the Knicks might try to get in on Harden, and obviously that didn't transpire. By the way, would you? This is really the last one. Would you rather have Ben Simmons than all of the Nets picks?
So when the deal got leaked before it actually happened, right? So like there was a bunch of leaking going on that day by Shams and Waj. They were reporting a bunch of different incarnations of this trade, and it got leaked out that the Nets were offering 4 first-round picks and 4 pick swaps, all unprotected. And as soon as that happened, I tweeted, if this is the deal on the table, Houston has to take it. Screw the Philly offer. This is the better deal. Ben Simmons is awesome, and I think in most situations you take the proven prospect, right? But this is 4 first-round picks and 4 pick swaps, all unprotected. You don't know what's going to happen in 7 years. You just
or 4
don't.
years or 3 years. The Brooklyn guys are not quite spring chickens. Just throwing that out there.
Like Sean Marks is an awesome general manager, and he's done a pretty good job at building out rosters without draft picks. So let's be fair to him, right? Like he can build out a pretty competitive roster even without draft picks. So you got to be cognizant of that. But I don't think that all those picks are going to be non-lottery. I think at least some of those picks are going to be lottery picks. So you just had to take the chance on that. You just had to take that deal, I think. And even if you don't expect one of those players to be cornerstone type players, I'm talking about the players that come back from those picks. Though that's liquidity. Those picks you can trade for another superstar, right? Yeah. Should one become available. And I think that's the stage of the franchise the Rockets are in. They're trying to acquire a cornerstone piece. If they don't believe if they don't believe Ben Simmons is good enough to be that cornerstone piece, well then they should definitely search for alternative solutions. And I thought as soon as the details got leaked, I was like, yeah, the Rockets should stop haggling about Tyrese Maxey. Get on this deal. Take the Brooklyn offer. It seems like a no-brainer to me. And I thought it was a better deal.
Well, I agree. I don't think you could turn down that deal. And by the way, of the 3 franchises that have essentially all given away all their draft rights, the Nets, the Lakers, and the Clippers, I think that the Nets, if I could only take the draft rights to one of those 3, I would take the Nets because partially because of
this is a question of mine. Like, how did Knicks fans feel about that trade? Like, were you guys giddy about the idea that they're giving up this many picks, or kind of like upset that they're acquiring a player like Harden?
Before the season and before the Harden trade, the Nets were my Eastern Conference Finals pick. I thought that they would get to the finals this year. I think that there's a good chance they get to the finals next year. I think they're probably going to win a championship at some point in the next several years. But
as a Knicks fan, how does it make you feel that they're giving up this much picks?
Yeah, so I wanted to preface that my answer by saying that because given that I already kind of thought that way, to me, this is great news because now you've taken a team that had the potential to be a long-term dynastic type of franchise, and they did something they didn't really need to do, and in effect, in my mind, they shortened their window.
So you believe they cut their legs out under them?
Yeah, and again, like I think some Knicks fans looked at the trade and be like, "Oh my God, now we have to deal with this in our city with these 3 stars here," and like their chances went up. To me, their chances were already great, so I don't think Harden makes an appreciation. I mean, what does it make? It makes it 5 or 10% more likely that they win a championship, and if whatever, if they do, they do. But it to me, it takes away the potential of a competitor for when the Knicks are actually going to, hopefully, knock on wood, be good. So
I like that this thing is real. This Brooklyn and New York thing. You always feel like some of this inner city rivalry stuff is fake, right? Like Lakers and Clippers. I don't really believe that's real. I do believe Brooklyn, New York is real.
It became a lot realer on June 30th of 2019 for me, at least. I mean, that was a depressing day, and I will always, I'm over it now, but dark day, not a fun day. So yeah, I mean, I hate the Nets. Just throw it out there. I don't care for them one bit.
That's great. I mean, it makes me very happy.
Well, I'm glad that. Why do you guys is there a hatred for? Well, actually, I don't know this. Is there more hatred for the Mavs or the Spurs or neither?
Well, from Rockets fans?
Yeah.
I think it's definitely the Mavs for sure.
Is it really?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Is that an ownership? I wonder because I personally have been worried that they're going to trade Oladipo to the Mavericks. and that was going to damage their pick this year. But you think they'll probably just do what's best in the best interest of the franchise?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like totally different lifestyle of the franchise. They need to make the bet. They need to acquire the best assets possible. Okay. And to explain the dynamics between the San Antonio Dallas thing, the reason they hate the Mavs is they have a begrudging respect for the Spurs, right? It's not like they don't hate the Spurs, but they they understand that's a dynastic team for like what 15, 20 years with Duncan. That you have to. It's really hard not to respect what they did there for so long. Whereas the Mavericks, like they were just an annoying pain in the ass for these guys, right? Like it was just like and I that's think. Great. I love inner city rivalries. They're so great. They're so and in the NBA, there's just tons of them because they're all next to each other. These teams.
Yeah, no, there is. That's great to know. I did not know that. This is good. I learn something new every day. Well, I hope the Rockets get the better of that rivalry till kingdom come. Let me tell you, because if there's a team I dislike more than the Nets, it's the Mavs now at this point. This was great. This was really a lot of fun. You've been, again, so generous with you. I like how I was like, all right, I'm gonna get you out of here 25 minutes ago. My apologies. Salman Ali, can you just tell folks at home again where they could find you and your content?
Yeah, at Salman Ali NBA on Twitter. You'll find everything on there.